Hello there. About a year ago, I was in the process of having an argument with another person. And during this argument, things were said that neither one of us would probably fully agree to being proud of today. But what was more memorable was what was stated afterward by another person. And they said, in so many words, Justin, don't make them feel bad because they're different from you. Don't try to tell them that they have to act the way you act. So they were telling me to allow people to have differences, to be open minded to the various things that we don't all have in common. And the biggest problem I had with that was not actually its execution, it was the fact that the person they were telling me to be mindful of their willingness to be different from me happened to be the complete opposite in terms of their acceptance of lifestyles that are not something they themselves would do. So it was just a complete hypocritical analysis. In fact, the argument actually started because they were trying to, disparage my own characteristics. But I thought about that concept and I said, if we have a lot of guys or women that just kind of annoy us, that we just happen to see, walking down the street, making a video, whatever, I can usually tolerate it because there's no direct correlation to my own events or things going on. But when we're talking about people who are in our own personal lives that consistently and recurringly cause us misery and annoyance and despair, no problem exposing and making them, sound as idiotic as they are. Now, if any of you are familiar with depression, you'll know that it is something that causes a lot of us to feel despondent with events, to feel disgusted with how things are. It is a running theme of being bothered by a dilemma or a series of dilemmas. So there was a woman who last year posted what could be considered a it's this thing on these various social media platforms where people will put a picture up, whether it's something they drew or something they just happen to take off the internet, and they'll put a little story to go, oh, I'm so upset because this happened. And, a lot of times it's to get attention, which I'm not against people doing per se. In fact, actually, um, after she complained about how things were going, I, went up and said, hey, look, this sucks, but you have to try and understand how things are. I guess I made my attempt to empathize with her scenario. And I figured that a person who um, does not like to suffer or be disillusioned, let me say a little Dirk, would not, you know, want the same fate for other people. So after a couple of months of no interaction because she won't respond to messages and I'm not a complete another. I don't really obsess about anybody that much anymore. There are people I'd like to talk to that I don't get to talk to as often, but generally, if you ignore the first three, four, five messages, you won't be hearing any more from me. So after she, and I don't talk for months, she posts a thing on her account where she says, "Oh, I'm gonna have this voiceover crap or whatever. You go, you call in, you go and speak." And I'm thinking, oh, this is gonna be a crowd of like 8 or 9 people in here, 'cause she's fairly popular following on the site. I click this thing, and there are only two people in there, me and her, and I go, wow, this is very surprising and very underwhelming. And so I make mention of the fact that there are people who have, they take pride in messing with others on these social media websites. Let me say hello to Bushaka. And I know, just we just have this very toxic way of individuals. And I say, you look at the way they treat people online, saying all this nasty stuff about them out of nowhere, you would almost make the case for eugenics. Now, eugenics is the process of selective breeding. Um, that is its definition without any of the nuances about other, things relating to it. And it was a process that was, popularized during World War II. Well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can always just exit. So, anyways, I say to her again, you can leave. Um, I make this claim, and she goes, "Oh, well, uh, why would you do that? Like, well, if people act horribly during their own life, why would I want them to inflict that same horror upon their offspring? And her response is to state, "Oh, well, uh, this is that's environment." And I say to her, "Well, look, I'm not in favor of this, but I get why people, the cases they make, I can't really argue against. It's kind of like while I do think abortion should be legal or just something people can do, I still get the pro-lifers. And as someone that doesn't agree with the death penalty, I still get why people are in favor of it. It's not endorsing the idea, but it's understanding the idea." And so I convey this to her, and she proceeds to, for almost, I think, 4 or 5 messages back and forth, tell me about, you know, how dare you favor this? And I say to her, look, I don't favor this at all. Are you actually reading what I'm writing? Um, and the entire time this thing is going back and forth, I'm just sitting there going, wow, she really is going to just drag this out, this argument that is two people who have the same position, with one empathizing more with the group that she's opposed to. But she starts talking about, she actually says, oh, you're in favor of killing people, which eugenics is not. Yeah, Dirk, she said, you're trying to justify killing people by saying that you understand. You're not endorsing. You're saying you comprehend why someone would advocate for eugenics, based off of behavior pattern. So we're talking about implementing selective breeding, which kills nobody. It just means you can't have a kid. And she's saying that's you being in favor of killing somebody. Actually, Envoy, you don't even have to catch up. This is literally the point I was trying to make, that this person on this website says I'm advocating for the deaths of people just because I said some people, I can understand why others would think they shouldn't have kids. And I think based off a lot of the stories you've heard on here, you can also come to that same conclusion. Now, you might not want to just say, yeah, let's make somebody sterile, but you get where that mindset comes from. And that's what I told her. My position was, I comprehend the idea. I'm not endorsing it. Um, Apparently not, Envoy. And let me tell you something. When I do the screenshot video, which again, I have some stuff in between. This is going to be one of the messages, and I'm going to start it off with this because it is a catalyst of the almost absurdity that goes on with people and their interactions. We're talking about a process that involves taking society's degenerates, which in my case knew no race or bounds. It knew no discrimination other than a behavior pattern. That literally was my thing. And she starts talking about, oh, it was used to make races you know go and oh, go extinct, and oh, so terrible throughout history. And I'm looking at him saying, what does that have to do with what I'm stating? Which is, if you have a behavior pattern that is bad, don't let that continue to go on. For example, imagine if Envoy every day of his life says, you know what? I like watching the world burn. So he prank calls every single phone number that is like his, just all day, every day. Saying all kind of obscene and nasty things to people. This is his whole life, or at least this is a very big part of his life. Who's gonna watch that pattern of behavior and say, "Yeah, that guy should be a father"? Who? I mean, like, and I'm gonna probably repeat this in that screenshot video, but when I looked at, if I put the text down in front of you, which it's coming, you will think I was talking with a child, not someone that was in their first or second year of college. I mean, I feel like I could go to any preschool across the U.S. and there's a couple of third graders who could argue this better than she could. But anyway, moving on to the other airhead. Now, this is one that hits a little bit closer to home because I deal with retardation from both males and females in person and online all the time. Um, you have a person who says, "I am very busy," and you say to them, "Okay, well, can you record this thing for me?" He goes, "Okay, yeah." Now, this thing is 4 lines of text. So I'll give you an example. I say to Envoy right now, I want you to, or not even Envoy, I want Dirk, who's grabbing his popcorn, to say 4 things for me, 4 sentences. And I want this in the next maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then Dirk says, "Oh, yeah, I can definitely do this, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah." So Dirk isn't able to do this in the next few weeks, even though I think that he personally, if he had tried, probably could have done it, but he doesn't. So I ask him, when do you intend on sending this over? And in response, I get walls and walls of text about Dirk's difficulties in life, uh, Dirk's problems with the milkman, with the with his finances, all of this stuff that means nothing to simply recording 4 lines of 4 sentences, rather, is that's a better way of putting it. And Dirk actually curses me out in the midst of this response. Now, this was something that, again, he consented to, he agreed to doing. And all of the problems in his life, which I'm sure he's afflicted with, I was not privy to at all. And yet, the response I received, you would think not only was I aware of his troubles, but was saying, hey, screw everything going on in your life, only worry about my thing. And so I actually, when I get this message, I respond back to him. I say, hey, you know what? I get that your thing is, all this troubling, whatever. Um, and after that, I literally have been sitting here for about maybe 9 or 10 days, just staring at that message, just astounded. Where did I go wrong? It's like the guy that raises himself from poverty to, like, the upper middle class, and then he has some son that he pays for going to school and all these different lessons, and then 20 years later, after his son's born, he's in prison, and he just sits there every day going, where did I go wrong? What did I do that caused this complete this scenario I did my best to avoid? I tried to be there for that person, accept them for who they were, and it still blew up in my face. What was the occurrence for this? So if you're reading his profile, this parent that does all this stuff for this kid, and they turn out to be bad, you can assume that this kid, who again had everything, just was a bad apple or a bad seed. So if you have this director of a project, and he says, "Hey, I want you to do this recording for me," and he's not privy to what's going on with you at all, and you shout and scream and lose your mind in some walls of text because he wants you to record 4 sentences of dialogue and gives you weeks and weeks to do it, you can reasonably conclude, hey, maybe it wasn't the fault of the director. Okay, Envoy says, I usually get extremely aggravated with people who override valid argument points with emotions, for example, aligning with social agendas and so forth. Well, that's a really good case of what I was talking about, I think at the start of last month, where I mentioned the female that was involved in one of my projects, who I sent 3 messages to and got no response from, and then she proceeded to curse me out after I said, "Look, you're not doing anything. You're a very talented person, but you're not sending anything. You're not giving me an update. Why should I continue to sit here and waste my time waiting for you to respond back?" And she says I'm rude while calling me out of my name in her subsequent response, and then blames me for not reaching out more. So again, we have another person. And then when I mentioned, hey, look, you were online. It was proven. We have the screenshots of you being available and just not saying anything back. Now it's time to say, well, maybe I just didn't feel like it. I'm going through so much, and it's so hard that I couldn't even send you a response back. That's where the emotion comes in. You say, screw the logic of telling this person that's doing this project, look, I'm going through things. I don't feel like saying that much right now. I'll probably try to give you an update later on. Let me just cool. Screw that. They want to make it to where they can have their cake and eat it too. They can disappear for weeks, say nothing, have you sitting on your hands, delaying your work, and then come back and show up, like nothing happened. And then when you call them out for it and say, hey, look, you're given time to do all of this stuff, and you just won't do it, you're the bad guy. You're the hellspawn. Envoy said it's like people get so emotional if you call. Oh, don't get me started. Envoy, another good example of an airhead. I had a person, I'm not even going to confirm their gender, who criticized my appearance. Um, and that's obviously beauty is an eye of the beholder. But understand that this person, based off of every individual that they have seen since, I guess, maybe the last 3 4 years, again, that I've spoken to about them behind their back, has called them overweight. Now, I'm not bringing that up to put them down. I'm simply bringing it up because they used my appearance to put me down. It's effectively the eye for an eye, where even if you don't agree with the tactic of bringing up the other person's, or just saying something negative about that person, you know that statement about the individual probably would have been stated if the person didn't fire the first shots. It's retaliatory. I'm eating a nice meal. Haven't gotten popcorn like you, but this is, and it's. Oh, I didn't realize you were having such a smashing time hearing about these examples of airheads. And it's really sad because you have a lot of airheads who have a basic level of talent, but they'll just respond to something in the most strangest of ways. I mean, that eugenics thing, I had such a when I speak about it in the way that I do, even I understand a lot of you, um, well, men have been airheads throughout history. That's why we have. I'm not even going to get into that, but I don't think it's based in gender. I just typically deal with more women than men for a variety of reasons, and so I'm not as used to encountering males who have the same problem. And I'm sure there probably are just as much, if not more. Who knows? I don't know if she was pro either of those. I didn't get to ask her. She literally would not drop the eugenics issue. Just it remained, and I swear to you, I will. She was one of the biggest motivators for wanting to do the screenshot video. I might just make that a screenshot video by itself and separate it from the other stuff. When you read the transcript of these messages, you're gonna think that I cut or something out or remove something, because she'll literally read what you wrote and then change it up. Teresa, I didn't say that. I say, oh, this person spends their time doing this on YouTube. She goes, they wrote mean comments. Like, no, it's not mean comments. It's just they're doing something that doesn't benefit anyone. So when we get the screenshots, you'll know. Oh yeah, look, she was all going out of her way to tell me how sophisticated she was with her understanding of that issue throughout history, and I said to her, you're bringing up examples of it that have nothing to do with my own statements in regards to it. You have to understand, my mind frame is this: you go into this person's stream where they're doing this thing, you have a fairly decent conversation, and then all of a sudden when you mention one thing kind of offhandedly, they just won't drop it. Not only would they not drop it when the stream ends, but they proceed to write it in message after message after message, to the point where I'm just still shocked that they ended up saying, I don't want to talk to you anymore because of this one topic. Um, and I literally even responded to their last message. I just sat there in disbelief. This person literally pissed themselves off. They heard a brief comment by me about this, and then in just paragraph after paragraph, um, or message after message, just won't drop it. So it was astonishing. It's like religious debates against atheists. I believe in God, but you will find on both sides religious people saying you will burn in hell, and atheists mocking God. It's like, damn, can't we be civil? Well, look, my whole thing is this. Um, I don't typically go after any of these religions unless someone tries to impose it on me, and or has their willingness to not just accept the fact that I am not what they are. So, for example, if I see a church and they're all in there worshiping and doing their thing, whatever. But if I have one of its members come out to me in the parking lot or down the street and go, "Oh, uh, I don't understand how you're not that religious and yet you have that kind of accessory," I'll say, this has nothing to do with that religion anymore. It has more to do with a person. I can actually see and feel with my own eyes and hands, and not subscribe to some text from thousands of years ago. But they would never get that response from me unless they initiate that kind of conversation. And it's really sad because these people have this thing about just they will always want to make the other person sound so unreasonable. When I show you these messages, when I give you the play-by-play of what happened, so just putting them all back down, stacked together, you're gonna know it was their fault because you are going to, even if you don't like have the narration, you're gonna read, if you actually read that stuff or hear me read it, you're gonna say to yourself, what else could he have done? Like with the two voice actors, was I supposed to read their mind and know about all the dilemmas going on? Two people that, oftentimes didn't even respond when I would write to them. Really, really take yourself out of this narrative that you have to feel sympathetic to anyone with a bad situation. Okay, Envoy says, if I met you personally, I would try to build a rapport and connect before bringing in religion because, hey, at least isn't shoving his rhetoric in my face. Yeah, well, it's another one of those issues where people say it divides into people, but if you don't agree with me on it, I don't care. It is what it is. So it you know, I'm trying to think of another one of these stories to throw out here because there were a lot of them. Uh, Things that were written, things that were said in front of me, and I don't know if I want to sit here for an hour and just break them down over and over. Well, there's a user who hasn't committed the same mistakes as the people who are getting talked about now. What's up, ALU? Also, the only reason he didn't show up earlier is because something something Toys R Us closed down. Something something he doesn't have a ceiling fan. Something something uh, his house is painted a different color than it was 10 years ago. He'll get the reference. Let's see here. Oh, and then to give you a final story of this before I close out, imagine having a person who is a grown adult. We're not talking about up and coming. This is a person who's middle aged, and they go to work 5 days a week, um, and they have very basic cognitive skills. They can drive. They can pretty much do anything. They have the Put to you like this: even if you think lowly of them, you believe in their potential to be better than what they are. Um, so you know they can do this thing if they wanted to, but just don't care to do it. So they go out and they complain about the fact that they don't have that much cash. Oh my God, I'm so impoverished. And yet they find themselves getting their nails done or their hair done every single 2 weeks, decade after decade. Now, the smart person might say, why not just paint my own? I mean, from what I can tell, you just take a little brush from what I've been in these places before and paint the part outside. That seems very simple to me, as far as something you can do and not have to go to somebody else over. I would think. And I've actually told them this that I believe so much in your cognitive abilities. You can figure out how to do that on your own. But for whatever reason, they can't do it. They won't do it. Um, as far as the hair thing is concerned, I mean, there are YouTube videos for that as well. I just think a lot of times when I talk about these, and let me also clarify: if you're a rich person, and you do this, it's fine. And basically, anytime you complain to me about the fact that you're out of funds or you're so underfunded, and then I literally year after year see you do something that if you stop doing it could save you money, don't want to hear it. But that's one of the best examples I can give you of the lack of self awareness. So, thank you for watching. Uh, we'll probably have another installment because don't all. By the way, all of this happened within the last maybe 2 months. Where there's other stories we can get into in subsequent installments. So I appreciate it. That's how some respond. I make my own choices. Oh yeah. Well, she makes the choice to keep putting her stuff down the drain, burning thousands and thousands. I mean, I want you to think to yourself: if every 2 weeks, you're going out and getting both your hair and nails done for over 20 years, how much do you think that cost? That's not thousands of dollars. That's not something you could have dedicated to, conserving or keeping for yourself to take care of the people that you call yourself giving a damn about. Ask yourself that. I'm sure it's been. Look, I love the Howland series. I guarantee if it hasn't been over 1,000 in the past year, it has to have been that by a decade of doing that. I don't know about the history of me, but it is certainly a saga. So maybe we can in the comments section, which it's like a vacant lot at this point, um, write what was the most absurd of these stories. You know, food for thought. So thanks.